In a dreadful day for our nation, 5 Australian soldiers have been killed in Afghanistan, this country's single worst day on the battlefield since the Vietnam War. 3 were killed by a man in an Afghan army uniform at the Australian base in Uruzgan province, the 4th attack of that nature against Australian forces. The other 2 were Special Forces soldiers who died in a helicopter crash in Uhlmann. Since the war began, 39 Australian soldiers have now lost their lives. Political editor Chris Uhlmann reports.
It's been a bad few weeks for the ANZACs. 7 days ago, Kiwi troops farewelled 3 comrades who'd fallen in Afghanistan. Today, the grim roll call of the Afghanistan war dead added more Australian names.
It's my sad and solemn duty to inform you that 5 Australian soldiers have been killed in 2 separate incidents in Afghanistan over the last 24 hours. 2 soldiers have also been wounded in these incidents.
In a war of so many losses, this is our single worst day in Afghanistan. Indeed, I believe this is the most losses in combat since the days of the Vietnam War.
This is a black day for our military forces, and our thoughts and prayers are obviously with those who have been killed and with their comrades and their families.
2 soldiers died in an accident in the early hours of this morning.
2 Australian Special Forces soldiers were killed when the ISAF helicopter they were travelling in crashed during a partnered mission in Uhlmann province. Early reporting indicates the aircraft was attempting to land in the mission area when it crashed. There's no indication of enemy action causing that crash.
Only scant details of the men have been released.
The one soldier was a 30-year-old private who had deployed on several operational tours. The second soldier was also a private. He was 23.
The other incident happened last night and was more sinister. The soldiers should have been safe inside their patrol base in the Baluchi Valley.
3 Australian soldiers from the 3 RAR task group were shot and killed when an individual wearing an Afghan National Army uniform opened fire with an automatic weapon from close range. Their comrades made every effort to revive the 3 soldiers, but unfortunately their wounds proved fatal.
All of the dead were based at Brisbane's Gallipoli barracks.
The first soldier was a 40-year-old Lance Corporal posted to the 2nd 14th Light Horse Regiment, Queensland Mounted Infantry. He was on his 2nd tour to Afghanistan and had previously deployed to Iraq. The second soldier was a 23-year-old private posted to the 6th Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment. And the third soldier was a 21-year-old sapper posted to the 2nd Combat Engineer Regiment.
2 others were wounded. One is in a serious but stable condition. The other has minor injuries. The Afghan national escaped.
Australian soldiers returned fire, but the perpetrator fled from the patrol base and operations are underway to detain the individual.
The Prime Minister has no intention of accelerating the phased drawdown of troops. 1,500 Australians will remain in Afghanistan for another 12 to 18 months.
As Prime Minister, I have spoken to families who have lost loved ones in Afghanistan. I've attended a lot of funerals, and one of the things that has always struck me is the resolve of family members to complete our mission. It is for us to show the same resolve.
The resolve of international troops to keep training their Afghan counterparts must be sorely tested. Last year, 4 Australians were killed and 10 wounded in 3 separate attacks by Afghans.
I think it's always in the back of your mind, and I think it's always something that you've got to be conscious of. And as a result of that, we're always reviewing our procedures to ensure our soldiers are as best protected as possible.
45 coalition troops have been killed by their Afghan allies this year. That means 14% of all combat deaths are what the military calls green on blue attacks. Those attacks have been growing every year since 2008, but they're not all the work of Taliban infiltrators.
General Dempsey, who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, recently visited Afghanistan, and he indicated about a quarter are due to genuine infiltration. The rest are due to a range of other issues. In the east of the country, it was due to intimidation of Afghan service members' families, whereby they were told through some means that their families would be targeted if they did not carry out some sort of incident against coalition forces. In other parts of the country, it's due to friction.
Retired Major General John Cantwell led the Australian forces in Afghanistan in 2010. He knows better than most how the Australian troops will respond to the killings.
This will come as a real blow to the diggers on the ground. At the heart of their mission, which is training the Afghan army, is the idea of trust. And if that trust is eroded, the mission is therefore eroded and put at risk. So there will be some very difficult questions being asked right now. After the last occasion when an Afghan soldier turned his weapon on Australians, they put in new protection measures. They had requirements for someone to be armed, wear the body armour most of the time. Those have been done. There's not much more can be done in that department. It's mental now, it's an emotional challenge for the leadership. How do we rebuild the trust between the Australians and the Afghans?
These deaths bring to 38 the number of Australians killed in Afghanistan in this longest of wars.
38 dead.